Hello, and welcome to our fifth session of Ed Talks, quick session talks that will focus on our economic development and recovery of our regional business. Thank you all for attending today. The Rockford Area Economic Development Council has recognized and reacted to serve our region in the best way we can to support our community efforts to recover, respond, and reimagine how our local business and manufacturers can successfully re-engage our economy. Please take time to reference the RAEDC website for additional reopen support and direction. As we look to the future, we at the RAEDC, in collaboration with the Rockford University and the Peary School of Business, have been hosting frequent Ed Talks. These conversations will focus on economic development issues we face amid this pandemic, with the purpose to provide expert guidance on how to adapt and overcome those issues. Today's topic is employee engagement, how leaders can foster engagement to create powerhouse employees. Dr. Mandolen Mull and Dr. Shuck cover the fascinating and much discussed topic of employee engagement. A company that has a high level of employee engagement is a healthier and more successful organization. Leaders need a strategy to ensure employees are engaged in an organization and a good culture fit. Leaders that can generate engagement find that employees are more involved, willing to take risks that benefit the organization, and are healthier overall. About our speakers. Dr. Mull is the chair of the Peary School of Business and assistant professor of leadership at Rockford University. With a PhD in organizational development and change and an MBA in international business, Dr. Mull's expertise lies in operations management and leader development. Prior to joining the realm of academia, Dr. Mull acquired over a decade of corporate leadership experience in the fields of healthcare, property preservation, and logistical distribution. Possessing an extensive background in leadership performance, Dr. Mull consults with organizations across the globe, providing analysis and interventions targeted to improve organizational performance outcomes. Dr. Mull also conducts scholarly research pertaining to leadership intentions, change management, and statistical analysis. Dr. Shuck is a tenured associate professor and program director of the Human Resource and Organizational Development Program and assistant chair in the Department of Educational Leadership, Evaluation, and Organizational Development, both at the University of Louisville. He is the author of Employee Engagement, a Research Overview, and has published or presented more than 300 scholarly articles, book chapters, and invited presentations. Dr. Shuck holds 6 U.S. copyrights for his research-driven intellectual property. He is a member of the Honorable Order of Kentucky Colonels and holds advanced degrees in counseling, student affairs, human resource development, and adult education. Before we get started, at the end of this presentation, Dr. Mull and Dr. Shuck will answer questions. Please submit your questions through the chat box function. I will read those questions to Dr. Mull and Dr. Shuck at the end of the presentation. And now, with great pleasure, I would like to introduce my professor, Dr. Mandolen Mull, and our special guest, Dr. Shuck. Dr. Mull.
Thank you so very much, Jared. We really appreciate being here today. I have enjoyed these Ed Talks so very much, and I'm even more excited to be able to be sharing it today with my great friend, Dr. Shuck. And so, Brad, thank you so much for joining us here in Rockford.
Honored.
And so for we're going to do a little bit of a laid-back approach here. This is going to be a little bit of a conversation that you'll hear a bit of a podcast-style approach between Brad and myself. We have been friends for a number of years now, colleagues, research partners. He's certainly somebody I consider a mentor of mine, and yet we've never done a presentation before together, my friend. So
that's right, never.
What an exciting opportunity, right?
Yes.
So, hey, so you're the engagement guru, right? The engagement guru. I mean, we did just see that you have a book about it, and I know a thing or two about engagement, right? What do you think?
Maybe. We'll see what we get into today. Let's see what we
You'll
can
see what I
into.
get into today, if I can hold my own with you, okay? So
There's no doubt about it.
I think I know a thing or two about engagement. So let's see what I know, okay? First thing I know is that disengaged employees lead fundamentally disengaged lives. That if I'm unhappy at work, when I go home in the afternoon, I don't just all of a sudden enjoy being, just have a happy life. Usually, if I'm disengaged with my work, it wears on me and it comes home with me. And so engaged employees live fundamentally engaged lives. So the converse is true there. Would I be accurate in that?
Yeah, so I agree with that. Part of it is the identity that we have in our work. Oftentimes, one of the very first questions somebody asks when we meet them is, "Hey, tell me about what you do. What do you?" And what they're asking for. Tell me about your job. Tell me about where you're employed. So much of our lives these days, in particular in a COVID-19 context, like I'm at home right now. My work is a part of my entire identity, and for many of us, the psychology of that bleeds over into other parts of our life. Some of that is caused by culture, management, leaders, coworkers, things like that.
Okay. So I'm tracking so far. I'm 1 for 1. Yeah?
1 for 1.
Okay. So the next thing I know is that according to Achievers 2019, and a lot of our research has shown this number around the anywhere from 75% to 82% of our workforce is disengaged. And that holds true year over year in different industries, different sectors. So if I've got a team of 10 employees that I supervise, I've got about 2 workhorses that are highly engaged, going above and beyond. And I've got about 8 folks that are just kind of checked out. Everybody's working for the weekend and going through the motions. Does that seem to align with what you think?
Yeah, so a couple of things I'll say about this. So I see this number a lot, the 70% or the 79% or the 80%. One thing that strikes me about this number is that this was the number that Gallup first reported in their first State of the Industry report on employee engagement more than a decade ago. And it's the same number that they reported this year.
Right.
It's moved the percentage or two up or down. I think that's pretty telling, right? So we have the employee engagement market is literally a multi-billion-dollar consulting market where people are coming in, offering strategies, surveying, thinking about strategic planning processes, and that percentage point has not moved 1% in 10 years. So something is amiss, something's wrong. The other thing I'll say about the idea of a globally disengaged workforce is I find engagement to be a really, really stable construct. So I think engagement is episodic. And what I mean by that is it happens between people and it happens in these moments that we've got. But for an employee to be engaged or disengaged, I find those experiences to be stable. What I mean by that is when we're engaged, it takes a lot for something to make us disengaged. And when we're disengaged, it takes a lot for something to re-engage us.
I would agree with that. I would agree. So I'm 2 for 2.
Two.
All right. So I also know that disengaged workers cost employers on average about 34% of that person's salary annually. So we've got 79% of my workforce disengaged. Each one of those 79%, and each one of those members comprising that 79% is costing my employer about 34% of their salary. And this is occurring because of maybe slowed down work, maybe more sick days, maybe more rework, lack of quality control in their performance and their productivity. Some of it is time waste, things like that we're seeing. Some of it's even actual, theft in that regard,
Sure.
Physical theft. So 79% of the workforce disengaged, costing employers 34% of that person's salary. Sound right? While they're on the clock. This is not when they leave or turnover. We're not even getting to turnover. This is while they're on the clock working for the employer.
Yeah, and
So
I think this is about potential. I think you're 3 for 3, and this is a potential. This is about potential more than it is anything else. So the number could be a little fuzzy here and be different for industry. I'm going to agree with you on the 34%, but I think this is much more about what potential is missing. So what are the opportunities? So a disengaged employee gives discretionary effort, raises hands in meetings, is involved in projects, is helping a coworker out, sees something safety related on the floor, makes and tells somebody about it, where a disengaged employee is like, it's not my job, I don't have to care about that, and they just walk on.
Right, absolutely. All right, love it that I'm 3 for 3. All right.
Money.
And only 35% of our 79% disengaged workers are willing to do anything about it. Anything to do about their engagement. They're willing to look for another job. They're willing to look for professional growth opportunities. They're willing to do something to get themselves back into a place of engagement. Only 35% of that 79%. And that's because disengagement wears on us, right? It wears us down. If I am disengaged at work, I don't go home and think, I wonder what life I could be living instead. I wonder what I could be doing better. I wonder where I could just grab things with both hands and be hungry about my work again, really enjoy that vigor that I had previously. Instead, we go home and Netflix and chill, right? Am I 4 for 4 at this point?
You're 4 for 4, and it's directly connected to your first point.
Exactly. Disengaged employees lead fundamentally disengaged lives. And so we know that engagement impacts 2 things. There's two outcomes in our organizations that a disengaged employee is going to impact. It's going to impact performance, and it's going to impact the tenure of the employee or the commitment level of the employee, whether they stay at the organization or not, whether that's voluntary or they get invited to leave. So disengaged employees have a direct impact on performance, and they have a direct impact on turnover. And we know, depending on what level an employee is at, if we replace an employee, we're looking at anywhere from 50% to 250% of that person's salary to actually replace and train up, not to mention the organizational knowledge that walks out the door when we lose one of our employees. So engagement is a really big issue. There's a reason people keep asking you and I right now, how do I get my employees engaged? And I can't help but wonder, is engagement really what we need to be addressing right now?
Yeah.
What do you
think? So it's a good question. It's a fair question. I don't know that right now engagement is the issue. I think right now survival, and for some folks, is the issue. Being able to manage what's going on at home and what's going on at work, which may very well be the same place. Like, for example, 6 months ago, we would have had this webinar in my office at the University of Louisville, but we're not. You're in my house right now. You're literally, my living room is right there. My family up until yesterday was home with me. They've since gone back to school, and to be quite frank with you, I don't know how I feel about that. My wife is a kindergarten teacher, and she's wearing a mask for 8 hours a day, trying to love on kids who are 5 years old who don't know how to do school yet, and her job is to teach that. And my 9-year-old daughter is in the 4th grade and is not able to socialize with her friends. So is engagement the question? I think it's a part of the equation. For me, engagement is much more than, and Dr. Mull, you and I have talked about this. It's not pizza parties. It's not freeze out Fridays or Taco Tuesdays. It is about, do I belong here? Am I connected to something that's meaningful? Does somebody in this organization care about me? And right now, the message around engagement needs to be centered around health and wellness. And any organization that is not talking and putting at the very forefront, balancing performance with health and wellness, is talking about the wrong thing. And I believe that when we come out of this, and we will in 12 to 18 months, the way in which we lead our organizations right now will define our organizational legacy and the narrative that our employees continue to tell our customers about.
I absolutely agree with you. You know, when we sit here and we think about the world that we're in today, engagement, like you stated earlier, you know, for 10 years, we have not seen the needle really move when people are asking us about engagement. And that's not for a lack of tons of research. You've really written a book on it. You've written a ton of information about this. You've consulted a lot on this. I've consulted a lot on this. I've done research in all these areas, and we're not the only ones. You're the guy, but there's a lot of other folks that they're doing it as well, right, my friend? And so
absolutely,
there is a world that people keep talking about engagement. We haven't seen the needle move here, but what now the challenge that we face today is seemingly, you know, overnight, everything changed at the same time, right? So whether we want to look at that as our work, our family, our school lives, our coffee routine, as Dr. Shuck was giving me a hard time, I have 3 things of coffee on my desk right now. I literally do. It's going to be a long day for me today. Our bedtime routines. Many of us are completely off kilter on that. The way that we interact with just, you know, our personal relationships, our work relationships, just societal relationships, when we're having dinner, or if we're even having dinner, snacking all day long, the COVID, what are they calling it? The COVID-15, COVID-20 now?
25.
Yeah. How we interact with emails, meetings, routine, all of it. All of those things are gone. The way that we knew those patterns previously have all been disrupted. And I think disruption is a really important word when we're talking about engagement at this point, because the reality is, I think this is where we're at, right? That we're dealing with distracted workers, not necessarily disengaged workers.
That's right. So let me draw a distinction here. So when we're disengaged, the example I gave about safety, when I'm individually disengaged, I don't care about the outcome. I don't have to care. I have disassociated myself from the outcome, psychologically, emotionally, and sometimes physically. Distraction is when so much matters all at the same time that all of those things compete for priorities. They compete for our resources. They compete sometimes for our time, for mental space in our brain, for a place in our heart so we can care about something. Physically, they compete for things as well. And I'll give you a really good example. I mentioned that my family was home with me, which I loved. And I'm, to be quite frank with you, I'm sad they're not home with me anymore. I miss my wife and my daughter. However, my job is to administer a program, write research papers, do original, innovative research. It's very difficult to type a paper, for example, on the nomological network of employee engagement and disassociating those things with job attitudes when my 9-year-old is like, Daddy, I'm hungry. Daddy, I need some cheese. Daddy, can you make me an omelet? Daddy, can I watch SpongeBob? You want to watch SpongeBob? You want to come see the Legos that I built downstairs? Hey, Daddy. And then my wife is teaching kindergarten, right, on a computer through Zoom. And so all of these competing priorities, and I care about them. Look, do I want to go see my daughter's Legos? Yes, I do, because at some point she won't be 9 and she won't want to show me her Legos. It won't be cool anymore, right? Do I want my wife to be an outstanding, terrific kindergarten teacher? Yes, and I'm sold out to that, right? Do I want to write this research paper? I really need to, because my job depends on it. Can I do all 3 at the same time? No, I cannot do all 3 at the same time. And so we find ourselves in these pockets where we weren't prepped for this. See, I think we could have handled a few of those changes that you listed. I could have handled my coffee routine changing, no problem. I could have handled my dinner time routine changing, no problem. Maybe some relationships changing, sure. but literally they happened overnight for me. And I would imagine many of the people on the call today, those changes happened overnight, and in a day, everything was different. And so there was frustration. There's this issue of capacity that happens when we find that everything matters at the same time. How do I even focus on anything? And that's why I say health and well-being, complete priorities right now.
I think so too. I think you're absolutely right on that. And I think it's something where I'm, the distracted worker, I think, is much more important of us being able to identify that. When we talk about disengagement, it's this idea of not caring about the outcome.
Right.
And I think, were you going to say something? Did I lose you?
No, you're good.
And so it's this idea that, when everything is mattering at the same time, our priorities are competing for attention, and it's not even, the lines are so blurred. I remember I used to have like an hour-long commute from when I lived back in Texas, right? And I loved that hour-long commute because what I was able to do was physically distance myself from work. And I was my PhD at the time, and so I would remember that I would listen to articles being read to me. I had a PDF reader reading articles to me while I drove down I-35 there in Texas, but that was literally a transitory routine that I had every day that allowed me to say I'm leaving work behind me and I'm shifting gears towards a new focus, a new priority. And I don't have that ability right now. A lot of our workers don't have abilities like that right now. And so the engagement conversation of like, how do I get them to produce more and give that discretionary effort and raise their hands in the meeting and care more and care more and care more and care more when they're just spread so thin. It reminds me of a comment that a friend of mine, a very kind friend of mine, our registrar here at Rockford University, Anna Jatowski, she said something along the lines once. I was kind of down on myself and I said, I think I have too thin of skin. And she said, I don't think you have thin skin. I think you're an empath. I think you're holding in a whole bunch and your skin is just stretched thin. And it was such a kind way of putting that. Yeah. And I think that's where our employees are. They're just holding so much that their skins are stretched thin. It's not that they're thin skinned. It's just that all of that's going on at one time.
And our leaders.
And
I think our leaders and our employees, the whole gamut is stretched thin, I believe, right now. Yep.
Yeah, I would definitely agree to that. Absolutely. So you wrote some research on the issue of capacity, right?
Yep. Yes. Yeah. So this is something that we've been thinking about for a little while. For about the last 2 years, when I've worked with companies across the country, we've talked about, what are all the things that you have going on right now? And we developed this thing that we call the capacity principle. So one assumption that I make, and I need to be explicit about here, is that I tend to talk about employee engagement in terms of principles. What are the principles that drive what's happening, what we're seeing? The practices of those things look different based on population, based on industry, based on employee to employee, really. And so we can talk about practices, but immediately, if I said, one of the things that really builds engagement is to have a competition board where you're tracking how everybody's doing and you're really building that competitive spirit. That works really well in a sales organization. It doesn't work well in a higher education context. And so immediately when I say practice, or I give a couple of examples of like, well, you could, branded logo wear is one way to build community. Somebody goes, well, that doesn't work here. I understand that. So I tend to talk in terms of these universal principles that have a tendency to cut across context. When I talk about engagement, whether that's employee engagement, community engagement, family engagement, whatever kind of engagement you want to talk about, the principles stay the same. The practices change with context. So the capacity principle is this idea that there's a finite amount of cognitive and emotional resources that we've got and that we can handle within a given time at a given context. There's only so much that we can take on before something spills. And the analogy that I might give and that I use oftentimes in class is imagine I've got 2 glasses of water here, and these 2 glasses of water are full. Then they're full to the brim. And I give them to you, Dr. Mull, and I say, hey, can you pour this glass of water into this glass of water without spilling a drop? No, there's no space. I can't do that. Students will typically like fumble around with it, the water spills out and they pour a little bit in, they get some in there, but inevitably you can't do it. At some point, we are at our capacity. And when we are at our capacity, there's emotions that are associated with that. Sometimes we've seen this in a workplace context where somebody's been in a meeting for a little while. There's a lot of information coming at people and people get frustrated. And we see that emotion on their face and they're like, or they're defeated. Their head goes down. That's a coping strategy, right? That's how they cope. If frustration is kind of the currency of capacity. And I sometimes will take from my own life where I've been in situations personally and professionally where I've just, my mom used to say, and others may have a mom that says something like this. My mom used to say, you're getting on my last nerve. And I would say and I would imagine like me like dancing on top of my mom's last nerve. And what she was telling me was like, I've reached my level of capacity with you. The next time we do this, I'm going to get frustrated with you.
Right.
Organizationally, the same principle applies. And there's been so much coming at us in so many different ways that the capacity principle is probably a key indicator of what's at play inside organizations.
I think that's very true because we talk about, organizations behave like people because they are made up and comprised of people. And so it's all of the idea of organizational behavior, right? And I did you see I slid through the slide early because we were getting to the frustration part. I'll get to that in a moment. But I love the fact that you snuck in on me. And I said, I have no idea where you're going with this, but I am here for it. Tell me, Dr. Bradshaw,
okay,
what you mean by this slide. Please tell me this.
Okay. All right. So this is how when I'm working or I'm consulting with a client and we're talking about the capacity principle, one of the things that I like to use is stories from my own life to illustrate why that principle and how that principle works. So 2 years ago, my wife bought me a chainsaw for my birthday. And literally in the picture on the left-hand side of your screen right there is the first time that I ever held a chainsaw. That's it right there. Now, guys, I have no business handling a chainsaw. No, I'm not sure. Look, if you need your electric changed, I'm not your guy. You need to change your oil. I'm not your guy. You need a tree cut down. I'm probably still not your guy, and I shouldn't be your guy, right? So I took my chainsaw out a couple of weeks later. You can see the scruff changed in the picture. So picture on the left, I'm a little clean shaven. Pictures on the right, I'm a little woodsy, and I wanted to feel woodsy. And anybody who's listening right now who's used a chainsaw is going to get a good kick out of this. So I start cutting trees up, right? We live in a place where I kind of need a chainsaw, but I don't know how to use it. And I'm using my chainsaw. And the chainsaw begins to smoke. So smoke begins to billow from the chainsaw. And I took this as a really good sign that I was doing this chainsaw thing correctly. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm a very good lumberjack. I'm an outstanding user of a chainsaw right now. So you know what I did? I pushed harder. I pushed harder on the chainsaw because as it began to smoke, it wasn't cutting as well. And so I thought, well, if I just push harder on it, it'll go back to working at full strength. The picture there of the chainsaw sitting is when the chainsaw broke. So I don't know if you know this or not. I do now. Did you know that you have to oil a chainsaw? Yeah, there's a little place where every time you use it, you have to put oil in the bar so that it will oil the chain And if you don't do that, guess what happens? It breaks, right?
It
And you can't use it anymore.
Yep.
It breaks, for sure. So now think about that principle applied to our life. How many times have we been working at 11:30 at night and we are trying really hard to push through? Eventually, there's a cost. There's a cost to that. Now, here's what we need to do. We know mechanically that if we don't maintain our cars, we don't maintain our equipment, we don't maintain appliances, we don't maintain whatever, right? We don't take time to care for the maintenance of these things. Eventually, they will break. The cost of that is that they break. If I don't put oil in my car, that's fine. That's a decision I can make. But 6 months later or a year later, I'm going to have to go buy a new car because that car will no longer work. The same thing applies in our life, where if we don't take time to develop and maintain our own levels of engagement and our own levels of health and well-being, there's a cost to that. The cost sometimes is disengagement. Sometimes that cost is our health. Sometimes that cost is our wellness. Sometimes that cost is our family, our community. It's addiction type behaviors. Because here's what I hear from some people. Listen, I go home and I'll run through a fifth of bourbon. I'll run through a fifth of whiskey. And I'll say, why do you do that? Because it helps numb out the feelings. Here's what they're doing. They're putting a temporary sponge in their glass and pulling some up.
Right.
And it goes right back in later. It's a temporary fix, but in the moment, it's what needs to happen.
I think that's very true, and I think it is important because we do see those types of effects with disengaged workers for sure, where we see health issues, we see teeth grinding, right? I mean, addictive behaviors, all of these kinds of things. And when we talk about frustration, it's really interesting. Our good friend and colleague, my mentor, Dr. Kim Nyman, is listening to us right now. And
Kim Nyman.
Shout out to Kim Nyman. And when I was learning statistics from her, I would always tell her when I knew I was getting frustrated, I knew it was time for me to walk away for a moment. I'd go for a walk. I'd have, a cup of tea, something that I could do to reframe. So when I came back, I could see things with new eyes. Because I think our tendency, and especially mine, is when I get up against something, I just want to sledgehammer through it. I want to push, and just want to grind it out. And all that does is generate more and more of that frustration. That's very much like your chainsaw, analogy there.
Right.
I think a lot of us, especially ambitious people, to think that we can just push through that or vault over these kind of obstacles or through this frustration. And the reality is we're actually creating a lot more frustration in the process. And so I know, meaning well-intentioned leaders were asking us these questions about how do I engage my people right now? And the answer is kind of, you need to back off. You need to be having conversations with them. You need to know your people a little bit better.
I'm having serious conversations with leaders who are saying things around checking to make sure their employees are getting all their work done, like serious micromanaging kinds of behaviors because of the fear that enough is not getting done. But I'm paying this person XYZ, or I'm doing they have XYZ position. The ways in which you communicate and you work with your teams right now is going to define how they work for you post. So space, grace goes a long way here. Now, let me tell you something about the chainsaw. The chainsaw came with an instructional manual, but I didn't have time to read it. Now, if I would have read it, I would have known, right? I would have known that I needed to do XYZ. And it came with a quick start guide. So it was only like 3 pages with pictures. Like it wouldn't have taken me 5 minutes to do that. And sometimes in our life, what we need to do is take a step back, just as you said, take a walk, go get a tea, we call it brain breaks here in my house with my daughter, Mandolen, create a board, do something that helps you organize. But pushing through is not going to be a helpful behavior in the long run. There's a cost to that. There's an absolute cost to that.
And I think, Stephen Covey said it great, right? With people, slow is fast and fast is slow. And it's building
Yes.
building these connections with our people. It's taking the time right now to have
Right.
conversations. Where can I remove barriers for you? What is frustrating you in your work that I can assist you with? In those kinds of conversations is where I really think we can really excel. And that allows us to prepare for long-term strategies and success, not the grind it out, push it through. So when we talk about this idea of, let's going back to employee engagement for a minute, you and I have had these conversations about, how everybody's kind of chasing this buzzword of engagement, and we hear it all the time. Everybody's telling us we've got to have more employees because we know it has a direct impact on performance. We know it has a direct impact on turnover. But the reality of it is, in these situations, is engagement even a fair ask to ask right now? And my argument is, and you and I had this conversation the other day, I don't think it is. I think we talk about well-intentioned leaders will say, well, I'm doing a pizza party to show my workers that I really appreciate everything they're doing. But pizza party may not be my currency. So a great example of this is I pulled up to campus today. I have my dedicated parking spot where everybody can tell I don't know how to park now, and it says Employee of the Year, Mandolen Mull on it. And that's great. And a lot of my friends, including our friend Kim Nyman, was really impressed that I got to have my own parking spot for a year anywhere I wanted on campus. I know. And I'm super appreciative of that, and I think that's great. But what I find interesting is what mattered the most to me was last Wednesday and last Thursday when I got done teaching my MBA classes late at night, and I sat here in my office and I had a lot of work still to do, and I was just bone weary tired, thinking, how do I come back in here tomorrow? I remembered who wrote, and I don't know who wrote this, but whoever nominated me for Employee of the Month that allowed me to be in the pool for Employee of the Year said, Dr. Mull's car is always the last car in the parking lot, and it's always, her light is always the only light on in the building. So last Wednesday and last Thursday, both nights, I just sat in here for just a little bit, just kind of completely numb after just hectic days. And I thought, somebody sees me. Somebody knows that my car's still here in the parking lot. Someone knows my light is still on. And that is my currency. That is how I find my engagement the next day. I appreciate the parking spot. But I think for people to know that, it's conversations. It's managers and leaders talking to their people and saying, in which ways do you feel appreciated? In which ways can I help craft your meaningful work? In which ways can I remove barriers for you, right? It's not how can I, let me know if there's anything I can help you with. That's a passive approach. Say, how can I support you?
I want to respond to that. Awesome. And I love that you're talking about a principle right now that is continuing to emerge in the research around belonging. So I was working with a group of, for lack of better, like prison guards and prison administrators within the Kentucky State reformatory system here, and they told me when we have a pizza party, it's amazing. We never get a chance to see each other. Nobody ever tells us that, but when we have a pizza party, it helps me feel like I'm appreciated and I belong. It's not that pizza parties don't drive engagement. Right. It's that when we just flop pizza down in the break room and walk away and just say, but I bought you guys lunch. I bought you guys lunch. Nobody wants your dumb free pizza. Here's what they want. They want to feel like we care, that somebody cares, that they belong someplace where they can be accepted for who they are, and that somebody notices them. So one of the things in the research that we've uncovered is that isolation or feeling ignored at work is one of the most traumatic things that can happen to a person. I see you, but I don't care. When we belong and when our managers host a lunch for us, or they nominate us for an award that gets us a parking spot, or I get a bonus of some kind, or I get some kind of an experience, or I get an email, right? Here's what that says. I notice you, I see you, and I care enough about you to take action. That's what engagement's about. Engagement for engagement's sake. And this is going a little far. Engagement for engagement's sake, for performance only, is corporate propaganda. It's exploitation of employees. But when we are engaging in ways that send messages of belonging, care, and compassion, it's game changer stuff. And that's why that needle's not moved in 2 decades, because we've had a very difficult time with words like compassion, dignity, empathy, joy, love, community, connection, and authenticity in organizations today. And I know that there are people who are potentially listening who work in industries where those words don't live, and they would be like, we can't talk about compassion here. We can't talk about empathy here. And I would point to your friend who is an iron worker, who has developed significant skill in this area, and who has fundamentally changed one of the most hardcore, most physically demanding jobs in the world. And this guy is talking about dignity, compassion, love, joy, and vulnerability. And I only point to him as an example to say, look, this can happen in police forces, this can happen in higher education, this can happen in management, this can happen in manufacturing. There's not an industry that cannot be changed by those kinds of words.
I absolutely agree with you. And I'm going to sit on this before we get to our question section, because I want for you and I to have a few more minutes just to kind of talk about this, because I think it's very important when we say, I was with a client the other day, and they did an employee appreciation lunch, which I thought was fantastic. And you know, the family that kind of owns the company, everybody was all excited about it. Everybody's there. And I get feedback that some of the leaders were sitting there on their phones, not talking to employees that were coming up. I know. And the sad thing about it is, you know, the leaders didn't intentionally mean that, right? But as leaders right now, we have to be better about that. We have to be intentional. We have to think things through. As you say, Brad, in that sense that we do not cross the same stream twice, right?
Yeah, right.
Everything we do as an intervention, everything we do has an impact on people. We have to kind of think that through.
But if we were to apply that same idea to our personal lives, we would not be confused about why that doesn't work. My wife comes home from class and she's taught kindergartners all day. And all she wants to do is come talk to an adult that can talk an adult conversation to her, right? And I've done this before. She walks in the door. She says, did you hear me? And I say, oh yeah, babe, I heard you. She says, well, what did I say? I don't have an answer. She walks away, right? There's only so many times I can do that before my wife's going to stop coming in the door and asking me to tell me about her day. Why would the same thing not work for coworkers, leaders, employees? Now, this is not a leadership thing. This is an everybody thing. We can all give dignity. We can all extend dignity in that moment to somebody who's talking to us, to put our daggone email down or to put our phone down. Facebook and Instagram can wait. It'll be okay. Given that presence, and man, how often do we not get that these days, where somebody's not looking at us and we're in community with somebody, and those things matter.
I used to challenge one of my very first management job. I noticed once that one of my employees, that a customer, I was managing a satellite clinic of a healthcare facility, and one of our patients had come up, and my employee had checked her in and never looked up. And so when the patient walked off, my gentle way was to say, what was her eye color? And my employee said, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, what a weird question. And I said, for the rest of the day, I want you to make a mental note of every single person's eye color that comes up to your desk. I want you to make eye contact and think blue, green, Can't really tell. Some, but Hazel, right? And I want you to make a cognizant effort. Every single person deserves for you to meet them in the eye and for you to register in your brain what their eye color is. And it's just seeing people. It's having these kind of conversations. And I think that that allows us to have that empathy, to have that that intentionality of how we're developing people in a really robust way during this time of crisis. Engagement isn't the conversation right now. Conversations, the conversation right now. Connection is the conversation
right now. Right. Now, those things build to engagement. Those things build.
Exactly.
When we feel connected and we belong and we're a part of, and my voice is heard and you see me and notice me, why would I not be engaged? Why would I not raise my hand and say, no, I'll take that on. It's not a problem. Yeah, I'm going to create space, right? And when we don't have those things, we don't engage. Why would we? Because somebody pays me? No, because pay becomes transactional at that time. Pay is only an issue if it is an issue. And if it is an issue, it is the only issue. So somebody asked the question about how does pay play out here, right? Pay is a justice issue from my vantage point. So there's a bunch of economic models and financial models we can talk about. But from an engagement perspective, pay is a justice issue. Am I paid what I'm worth and equal to other people within the organization? And if I don't feel like I am, it becomes a distributive justice issue. Or if I can't pay, if I don't get paid enough money to pay my bills. When pay is the issue, it is the only issue. But in every pocket of research that I've looked at, and I was looking at some new stuff yesterday from a company that I do a lot of work with up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, pay was at the very bottom of the driver list because pay is transactional and engagement is not transactional. It is transformational. It is a different phenomenon.
Yes, we usually see that pay comes in fourth or fifth on ranking, right?
Sure.
What people value in the work. Nobody really happy and connected in their workplace says, wonder if I could make more money somewhere else. It's become, dissatisfied, disengaged, and unfulfilled that we start to look in other areas. Hey, you want to open this up to some questions?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll let you drive the bus.
All right, Jared, do you want to ask us some questions?
Yes, I will. We have a number of questions. We'll try to get to all of them in the time remaining. The first is, I guess, a statement for discussion. It says engagement at the individual level is different than engagement at the organizational level. This is evident when you see large MNCs transforming to having more full-time contract employees compared to full-time employees. MNC are realizing that their full-time employees are shrinking and being replaced with contract hires. Engagement is different for both populations. I'm guessing the question is explain or discuss the difference between a contract hire and an FTE.
I think I can see, and in a lot of that, working with unions myself, I'm in consulting with unions. I definitely can appreciate that distinction that somebody's saying. It's difficult if I'm a manager and I'm leading someone that is contract versus someone who is not. Absolutely. But I think in those regards, you're looking a little bit more in a transactional approach of what are my recourses if they don't do the work? What is my recourse if I'm what are my levers in a sense, I think, is what that starts to get to. And that makes, again, the employee look like those of us that were around in the 90s look like a tool. It's not that kind of tool. We mean an actual tool, an operational unit. And while I do believe that we are that, to an extent, because of how we fit into our roles, I think it's very important to understand that employees don't want to feel like tools, whether they're contract employees or they're not. They want to feel like they're embedded and they belong. And if they're a contract employee, you're going to have your work cut out for you to connect them into that belonging. But you can do that. Just like Dr. Shuck said, my iron workers, if I can walk into rooms with some of these hardcore iron workers, and the friend that he referenced is 6'6", is just a behemoth of a gentleman. And he can sit there and talk about vulnerability and all these kinds of things and feel a sense of belonging and create teams that have sense of belongings, and they're all contract workers. They're all contract workers. We can do that, but it's understanding that we have to take that lens away of, well, I don't have a performance plan the same way for this contract worker as I do for my FTE, or I don't have levers and recourse and parameters the same way. I think we have to think more about engagement and development and connection and that sense of belonging in and of itself.
Thank you. Next question. Outside of COVID, how much does the inequity of salary, sometimes at the rate of 200%, between levels of an organization impact the engagement amongst staff?
So I would say, I would make the argument that it does not, if people are acting in ways that are admirable, in ways that we find are inspirational. Nobody really has a problem when good people get paid good money. People have a problem when maybe disingenuous, inauthentic, superficial, self-serving individuals get paid good money and feel a lack of disconnect or a lack of connect.
You know, I had a conversation with somebody the other day, and here's another issue that I think is important to think about organizationally, is equity of pay across genders and across race and ethnicity. And I legitimately was in a conversation with a friend of mine who is a female in an administrative position who gets paid $7,000 less than a male counterpart who does the exact same job. And somebody's gonna have to explain that to me. Like, I don't understand. I do not understand how that stuff happens. If there are pay inequities across genders and races and ethnicities, like, you got to fix that stuff. That stuff's not okay. And we've got to be on the forefront. Otherwise, pay is the issue. And she was like, I don't even think it's worth it anymore. Because here's the message. Here's the psychological message behind that. You don't matter as much as he does.
Right.
And that's what she hears. That's not okay.
Right.
You don't belong here as much. You're not as much a part of the community. That stuff has to get fixed. That stuff absolutely blows my mind that it exists today.
I would agree with that. I think that's very, very true. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, it's a hard line stance on that.
Next question. Empathetic leadership is so important at this time. Is there a point of being too empathetic?
I'm going to bet on empathy. And here's why. Because empathy is noticing someone without a judgment statement. It's not saying that I give them a bunch of sympathy or that I go around and it's all rainbows and unicorns and stuff. Empathy is being able to see someone in a situation. So, for example, there was a question above around parents and non-parents. Both of those groups matter. Right now, but there are some people who are single, who have been at home, who have no interaction, right? And I'm telling you about all the interaction I've got and how my daughter's hungry all the time. Both groups matter. Empathy is me being able to see that person in that situation, which may be very different from what I have, and not judging the person for how they're feeling. That's what empathy is. So I'm going to bet on empathy every time.
I would agree with that. Abe Lincoln has a quote that should be known very much more, and it says, if you trust all the time, you will occasionally be disappointed. If you never trust, you'll live a life of misery. And so to that extent, I also will always bet on empathy, because I have to have the grace space. I talk about preemptive forgiveness a lot. I'm a very person, but I think preemptive forgiveness, especially right now when we're dealing with people reaching that capacity threshold and that cost of capacity threshold being frustration, pre-forgiveness that, hey, we're gonna throw some spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks, and we're gonna hope that this works, but we're in uncharted territory. Empathy allows us to say, we don't have all the answers. You don't have all the answers. I don't have them all. We have different lenses, and together we create a kaleidoscope of things that we can see very colorfully. And so I would always bet on empathy as well.
Thank you. Next question. How can organizations balance parent and non-parent needs so everyone feels their needs are met in an equitable manner?
First thing I would do, I would ask them.
Exactly. I was going to say the same.
I would ask them. I've been in more conversations with people who are in positions, who are carrying out jobs from decisions that got made 2 to 3 levels above them, and were never asked about the implications of the decisions on that job. And so the very first thing I would do is I would ask, what are your needs right now? What are some things that you're thinking about? How can we help you guys? I'm telling you, both groups are struggling. Your parents who are homeschooling kids right now, who haven't thought about 4th grade math since about the 4th grade, they're struggling to maintain their work balance. And the same thing with the people who are non-parents. They're struggling in the same ways, but differently. The context has changed.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. I think well-intentioned, and I keep saying this, well-meaning leaders keep doing these. They think they know what they're doing. I can do this without having crucial conversations. Talk to your people. We used to always talk about management by walking. We've got to be better about seeing their eye color, right? Connecting to them and asking them, what barriers are in place for you right now that I can assist with? How can I support you? That has to be the most crucial question we're asking our people right now. How can I support you? Not, let me know if you need anything. That's passive. Be proactive on that.
Right.
What else you got for us, Jared? See, Brad can see the chat. I can't, so I don't know.
Oh, okay. I'll toss one out for us. All right.
Okay.
So what do you think? I gave the chainsaw analogy earlier. What do you think the equivalent of the chainsaw oil is in the workplace? So what is the oil that kind of helps it all work together?
I would say, so number one, what I know happens is metrics always are moving. Goalposts are always moving. You and I've talked about that. You hit your goal this month, nobody says, great job, now let's reduce it by 20%. Then next month, it's always moving. I think the oil that is the solution is community. I think it's feeling embedded with each other. People, so look, I don't want people to be adaptable. Adaptable is setting a bar and people meeting it. We keep talking about adapt to the changes. No, you evolve. I want you to go one above. I want you to feel inspired. I want you to want to go more and feel connected with the team that you're working with. So in order to do that, I have to show you that sense of belonging. I have to have those conversations. I have to show you that I know you exist and that I see you. You and I have a great friend, Dr. Jason Motes, who will send text messages. You do the same thing with me, Dr. Shuck, and say, I see you, I value you, I appreciate you. We have got to start using those kind of languages and our actions to show our employees that. And it's not just a pizza party. It's having the conversations. It's seeing them face to face, if we can, or making one-on-ones.
Yeah. So I'm gonna respond in the same way, and I'm gonna connect to another question that we've got here.
Okay.
For me, that thing is compassion. When we're able to extend compassion and share our umbrella is an analogy I like to use. We don't judge. If we see somebody in the rain, we don't judge them because they don't have an umbrella. We don't yell at them because they weren't prepared for the day. We just go share our umbrella and we walk together and we help each other out. So at the University of Louisville, I was fortunate to work with a research team that has, I think, done some interesting work around the idea of compassionate leadership. And there's a question here around, is there a lag? Do we think that there's a lag between leadership practice and leadership research? And the answer to that question is yes, for me. And here's why. Because it's acontextual. So what are the implications for practice? So tell me, what are the implications for practice for LMX leadership theory? What are they? Tell me what they are. Or transformational leadership. We need you to be enthusiastic and exciting. Man, I can't think of something less authentic, right? The implications for practice here are, if you don't do these things that transformational leaders do, you're a terrible leader. You just can't do it. Right. Or LMX, and I'm simplifying things for sure. I can see the eye roll. I get that at home a lot, so I understand. I think compassionate leadership brings it down to the individual level, and we can talk about very specific behaviors. Dignity is something everybody can do. Presence is something everybody can do. holding people accountable. And there's another question about what do we do about micromanaging? Accountability is still alive in the era of COVID. Look, I don't get my stuff done, we got a problem at the end of the year, right? And I've got to account for that. But my leader can treat me with dignity while holding me accountable. They don't have to yell at me or call me out in public or send me nasty grams on a Friday night. There's different ways to do this. Your thoughts on the leadership to practice? Yeah.
I would say accountability is not adversarial. Accountability is for the advancement, development, and growth of an individual. And so that has to be the distinction. And that's why it's not micromanagement. And so there is a difference between practice and theory of what we're doing in scholastic work, but context. The world is changing, the teams are changing, the resources is changing. Every single person you hire, we hire people based on their past performance with the expectation that they're going to perform that way in the future in completely different contexts. It's a completely insane process that we do. We've got to start looking at people's potential. We've got to look at how we inspire people. We've got to look at how we, call on people's better angels to a sense. And that is what we're trying to get at right now, is when we connect people with that, that is when we start to evolve. We don't just adapt. We don't just meet the bar. We launch over it and we take others with us. And that is leadership self-efficacy. That's our ability to navigate our people through obstacles.
Absolutely.
Ability to get through this crisis.
I love it.
Wow.
I love it.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you, Dr. Mull. Thank you, Dr. Shuck, for such an excellent presentation. Your strategies to help us understand what employee engagement is and how we can apply the mentioned techniques to our daily work and life. We all greatly appreciate your time and expertise. We are all very fortunate to have both of you here on our presentation. Thank you, Dr. Mull, Dr. Shuck. Thank you all that attended. We hope you found value in today's presentation and you can take what you have learned here today with you back to your workplace. I just want to close with some quick housekeeping. Our next webinars, we're going to have webinars on September 22nd. It's the virtual services available to help you export with U.S. commercial service. October 7th, we have the Economic Development Boot Camp in partnership with ComEd. October 8th, we have the Defense Contractor webinar series with IMEC. And November 11th, how the economic of the future is impacting us now with the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. For more information on these webinars and other RAEDC web resources, please visit the Rockford Area Economic Development Council website. And please do not hesitate to reach out to Rockford University for additional support and resources. We have a powerhouse of a university right here at our region's center point. Again, thank you all for attending today's presentation and have a very good day.
Have a great day. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Shuck.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.